One big more round of applause for Ms. Renee Rossi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. This is a really special evening. It means so much to me, and each one of you are a part of this. So I'm so glad you were all willing to come up on stage with us and sit in circle with us and have this conversation. We're just so honored to have you all here. So we have a brief video to show you to kick off our conversation.
Have we forgotten how alive our world is? Forgotten to wonder at the smallest, to be in awe at the largest. Maybe we start small, leave our comfort zone one step at a time, and let ourselves be taken on a journey. What if we refuse to see our world as inanimate and mundane, and instead as a great mystery that beckons us? Be astonished, be creative, and let it go. Now remember, disorder becomes order, which becomes disorder again. We are here so temporarily, so momentarily. So as a new day begins, let your imagination feed the world and ask yourself, what beauty are you creating with this precious life?
Allow me to introduce Day to all of you. He is an author and an artist and a very generous and lovely teacher. He's my teacher and an all-around amazing human being. So Day, thank you so much for being here with us to talk about your work and what just happened here in front of us.
No idea.
So let's start with the obvious. When did this begin?
I think we got in here at 9 a.m. and then put the soil down until probably 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Do you normally do an altar this size in one day?
No. This is usually a 3-day project. But it's in New York, and you kept on saying in a New York minute. So, we were busting a move. But honestly, this is done with many hands. It is impossible for me to be able to start at 10 a.m. and to finish by 6 p.m. Without a lot of help. And I run a school where I train this as a healing modality, and we had 5 graduates from the school here today. Raise your hand. And then Tim, where are you? And then, so we have a bunch of folks here that just really put their shoulder to the wheel and helped create this nest and fill in the green and just really tend to the space. So yes, it's my vision, but it's also done with community and with lots of people just making this happen, yourself included. So thank you.
And I'm curious how much of this you pre-planned out and mapped out in your mind before you got here this morning?
This is AI. No, I'm just kidding. There was no plan. This is me starting in the center, putting down a circle of stones, and then really this whole entire project, every piece I've ever made it's relational. So it's what shape wants to be in relationship to the next shape. How close do they want to be? How far do they want to be together? Same with color. Everything is in relationship with each other. And so a lot of this work is me just paying close attention to how close or far, what shapes want to work together, and just really listening. It's a lot of listening. And not overthinking.
So where does inspiration come in? How does that fuel your building and your creation? So
if you've read my books, you know that I love words. And and I love etymology. I love the root of words. And so what's the root of the word inspiration? Huh? To breathe in, to breathe. And so we're all doing this right now. We're all breathing in the same air. We're breathing it out. We're doing the same exact thing as every living being on this planet is breathing. And so inspiration comes from without, and then it moves in, and then it leaves. And it's never static, and it's never guaranteed. Which means that when I come to a project like this, there's really sometimes a negotiation, sometimes a plea, where I'm really trying to court the muse so that I can create something again. But just like air and spirit, it moves at its own accord. There's nothing that I can control about it. I can just try and be an open vessel so that it moves through me into the world. Another way I work with the muse and inspiration is that I'm always trying to, as soon as I find myself going down a path that feels familiar, I immediately take the exit off that path. And I'm trying to push myself into new directions. It was hard today because of the time limitation, but I still think I've been doing it. I'm moving in new directions. I'm trying to expand the landscape that the muse is roaming inside of me and out into the world. And so that is something I'm very attentive to as an artist, is never repeating myself.
So do you have any practices or daily practices that you would consider that helps you stay open to receiving this inspiration and staying in relationship with it?
Daily practices that help me open to inspiration. So this is something that so let me give it a little backstory. This is a practice, morning altars, that actually began both with the death of my father and with a massive relationship breakup. And it started, I adopted my father's dog at the time. This is in 2011. And we used to go on these long walks in the hills. I live out in California. And the dog basically saved my life, because when you're grieving, it's really easy to feel disoriented and wanting to feel safe. And so there's a certain kind of, I don't know, this is at least for me. There was a desire for me to stay insular and in my home, but the dog needed to go out, as dogs do. And so she would take me around. We'd go on these long morning walks, and we would go into the park near my house, up into the hills. And one morning, we just walked to the top of this hill, and we saw these amber-colored mushrooms growing under this eucalyptus tree. And what compelled me at the time was they were so beautiful. It looked like someone painted them with watercolor. And I just sat down under that tree, and I started to arrange the mushrooms into this diamond shape. And then I took eucalyptus caps and eucalyptus bark, and I just suddenly made something, it took an hour, I made something beautiful and symmetrical. And for the first time in like 8 months, I felt my grief lift a bit. And I knew that something was here. Like I was, in retrospect, I was metabolizing my grief. I was processing it, not with my head or like through talking, but through my hands. And there's something about just like moving things that are in disorder and bringing them into order that reminded me there was such a thing, because grief is terribly disorienting. And so I challenged myself, could I go back to that same spot for 30 days and make a new piece? Not obviously this big. They were like 2 feet by 2 feet. And I did. 30 days came and went, and I did not want to stop, and I didn't after it stopped. And at the beginning, I was dedicating them to my dad or dedicating them to my ex, and then life happens. And a friend had a baby, or someone moved, or someone got a new job, and so I was starting to make them for other reasons besides my own grief. And then I started to put them out into the world, and it became a thing where people in Poland or Brazil or Australia would go out into their places where they gathered their material and made them out of material that I had never seen before. You know, this woman in Iran sends me an altar that she made out of, material that is very indigenous to Iran and not to North America, and it was just fascinating. Anyway, to answer your question, walks, like getting out of my house and getting my feet on the earth and my head in the trees and remembering I'm a part of a much bigger world than the human world. And when I can find my way up a hill or a mountain or at the ocean or in a creek or just sitting on my front lawn and looking up at the clouds, I'm inspired. This is magic material. These colors are amazing. This texture is amazing. This is life and death sitting right here. So I'm inspired by the cycles of life. And there's no better teacher about the cycles than nature. And maybe you feel that way too when you're in nature. Like you can feel yourself part of something much bigger than you. And there's something really, there's a remembering that happens when I'm in nature that allows me to feel connected and that I belong to this living world. And so my inspiration comes from that.
Thank you for sharing that story. I am curious if you had any idea when you started making altars, maybe they weren't even called that at the time, and you started sharing them, that they would reach people all across the world.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, I honestly started doing this for myself and my own grief, to move through my grief. It became like my favorite part of the day. And I think not just making art, but making ritual art, dedicated art in the spirit. And by the way, every indigenous community, every indigenous culture around the world makes impermanent earth art for different reasons. I was teaching a course at, I think it's called The Art of Living in North Carolina, and there were many folks from India in the audience. And there's a variety of impermanent earth offerings, altars that are made in India. Some of them are, depending on the region, some are called kolams, some are called rangolis. Anyway, this young woman raises her hand and says, in our tradition, we are through the matriarchal line. The daughters, the mothers, the grandmothers they pass on a pattern, and at dawn, the mother or the grandmother goes outside the front door and they lay down cornmeal and flour, and this pattern that had been passed down for hundreds of years, and this young girl said, I was really just interested in being like a modern person, and I actually said to my grandmother, I don't want to learn this. And so in her line, hundreds of years of this pattern being passed down stopped with her. And then in seeing my art and in talking to me, she said she was inspired to call her grandmother and learn her people's pattern. And that just really moved me, that I could be a part of any kind of someone recovering their ancestral lineage, their heritage. And then folks all over the world. I mean, I get art made from folks in Peru making despachos, and Thailand folks making sand drawings, and it's amazing to just see both traditional art. Many of you are probably familiar with Tibetan sand mandalas. If you've ever seen them live, it's kind of a miraculous thing. And then also it's amazing to see like regular folks making them. I have this one story of this woman in England. She was sitting in her car one morning, dropped her kids off at school, sitting in the parking lot, and it was the 10th anniversary of her mother's death. And she just was like, she knew she needed to do something, but she didn't know what she wanted to do. And she's flipping through her phone on Instagram, just kind of like, just zoning out. And she comes to my feed, and for some reason, she got inspired. She left her car, she went into the woods behind her kids' school. She started foraging moss and pine cones. She found fox bones behind her kids' school. And she sits down and she starts to make her own piece and pattern. And she's talking to her mom out loud. She's telling me that she writes down this whole story, and she says the first time in 10 years she felt close to her mom since she died. And I get stories like this all of the time, because this is, why do people do this? It's so accessible. You just have to go outside. I taught a workshop, by the way, a couple years ago in Lower Manhattan. 30 people. Step one of this practice is wander and wonder. So like, go out in your neighborhood and just explore and see what you find, and allow yourself to see the neighborhood as if it was the first time you saw it, and really take in how beautiful it is and how rich it is and how much is there. And anyway, these 30 New Yorkers were like, we're not going to find anything. Like, there's nothing downtown. We're not going to find anything. I said, just pretend that it's possible. Just lean into the possibility. And so they were like, okay, fine. So I let them go for an hour. And then they come back an hour later. This one guy's holding a reishi mushroom, like this big, that was growing on a street tree. Another woman comes in with like 40 pigeon feathers. They found so much beauty in Lower Manhattan. And I think that some of the time we get so lost in our lives, we really stop seeing. We stop seeing what's around us and how rich our world is. And when we can really see it again, and children are like some of children are experts at this. They really can see, and they can help us see again. But this practice, this 7-step practice, part of it is really about wonder. Like, wow, we're alive. Wow, we're on a living planet. What a miracle it is. This, by the way, will come down in like a couple hours. This is, the word ephemeral literally means for a day. This is less than a day. But our lives are ephemeral. And, some of us might not wake up tomorrow. So knowing that, how ephemeral things are, like, how do you seize today? How does that influence your capacity to live as fully and boldly and beautifully today? So this is the practice that I'm constantly learning that through this. How can I just savor this now? Because this will be gone soon. So will this. Very soon. So like, thank God we're here. Or goddess, or whatever, universe.
Ooh. Yes. It's really, in each of these steps, you know, you're talking about the wonder and the wander and the impermanence, like in each step there's healing. I wonder if you can speak to that. Like that's, even though healing isn't one of the steps, it sneaks in there throughout this process.
Yeah, I'd say the consequence of being alive today in our tech crazy world is that we all, many of us feel quite isolated and disconnected and lonely. At least 300 years ago, your people and mine were living much more closely together, closely with the land and also closely with each other. And so we're in a very undone time. We're in a time that needs a lot of healing. And so each step of this practice, there's 7, really stand alone. But each step of them are about reconnecting back in, refinding our sense of belonging to this world. And in some ways, you know, all of this that you're looking at, like 6 hours ago, they were all just many pieces scattered everywhere here. And so we're bringing them together into some order, some symmetry. I don't know how you feel about symmetry, but for me, symmetry really relaxes my nervous system, which is why I make it all of the time. And so each step of this morning altars practice is really about connecting back in and remembering our place in the world and remembering our purpose in our lives. And it's as simple as walking around your neighborhood, not in a straight line. I know New Yorkers, we're all like addicted to getting places, you know, but to me this practice is about wandering and exploring. It's about sitting and taking in this moment. It's about creating and letting yourself be taken with your own innate creativity. And it's also very much about letting go. I've made over 1,000 altars, and every single one that has disappeared or been eaten or blown away or rained on or stepped on, or sometimes animals have run on it and squirrels snatched acorns from my altars. There's heartbreak in that. There's a bit of heartbreak, but that's a good thing. I think a lot of the time we hold ourselves too strongly, too tightly. And remembering the impermanence of things and being a little heartbroken is actually proper, because it means that I love this. Like heartbreak, grief equals love. You don't grieve the things you don't love. So to me, you know, impermanence, like, yes, am I sad this is going to disappear in a few hours? This was an enormously fast labor and backbreaking and beautiful. And do I wish this could, well, maybe I'll talk to your boss. Keep it around for a week. But no, this is going to disappear very soon, and there is heartbreak in that. But it also allows me to really savor, and there's healing and love in that too. And, you know, kids, like, they build these beautiful things and then they destroy it, and they don't care about that. And yet, as adults, we get so caught up in preserving things. And there's a muscle that we all need to exercise, which is letting things go. Not holding on, not trying to keep, not trying to preserve, not trying to maintain, but making something for the pure joy of it and then letting it go.
So, Dave, can you speak to us a little bit about what your grand vision might be now? As you said, when you started arranging things, you know, when you were grieving the death of your father, you had no idea it would reach so many people and be so healing and transformative. So now you have a better idea of what this practice can do, and you have a teacher training. Like, can you tell us what your grand hopes are for it?
Yeah, there's a woman by the name of Ronan White who's actually, she's, I believe, either full or partially Mohawk, and she lives in upstate New York, and she's actually I think now she moved to California. And she's a seed saver. And her, like, it's a profound practice to her people to take care of the seeds. And she said in one of her talks, which was very profound, she said the best way to keep seeds is to put them in the ground. That's the best way to keep seeds. And letting them grow and become plants, and letting the plants give birth to new seeds, and then taking those seeds and collecting them and putting them back in the ground, and there's a cycle in that. And that's the best way. You don't want to keep seeds in a jar, because then they become not viable anymore. They die. And so that to me is, this practice are seeds. So my grand vision is to give them away. Right now, my grandest vision is to give them away to helpers and healers around the world. And this training that you're talking about is me teaching others how to bring this practice back to their communities and clients, so that this becomes much bigger than me. And we've already, we've graduated, I think, almost 200 people. And there's like 12 countries represented, and it's amazing to see this become something way beyond me. And it's amazing to sit here with all of you who are taking this practice and bringing it out to your people and your communities. And it's really, it is like such a gift you're giving me to actually see this live beyond me. And so, at a time when we're all like over-teched and screened and moving very quickly, and AI is really coming in strong on the scene, to get our hands dirty, to play with flowers, to make something beautiful and ephemeral. There's a remembering in this that is very old. And it's a remembering of how, to me, it's a remembering of how to be human. And I don't want that. I don't want the responsibility of bringing this to everyone. I want to do this with you. I want to make that remembering happen in community. So that's my grandest vision, is to build a community around this, and we are. Those 5 or 6 or 7 folks, that guy over there, Tim, raise your hand. We've been working on this teacher training for 3 years, and today is the first day I've met him in person. Today is the first day I've met all of these folks in person. It's a gift to have online spaces. It's a gift to have the virtual space. It's a gift to have technology, and yet it's also a gift to hug you in the flesh and see your eyes and touch stones with you and flower petals with you. And like, it's both of those things are a gift. And we're living at this intersection these days of technology and being very mammalian, we're all creatures. And it's important to not forget that, to get our hands in the earth sometime. Is anyone here a gardener? 2 people? Wow. 3, 4, 5? Okay. Doesn't it feel good to get your hands in the earth, get your face in the sun? So that to me is like, that's what I'm saying when this is like a human-making endeavor. That's what your people and my people have been doing for a long time, is getting their hands in the earth and their face in the sun and making things. And so that's my vision.
And as a teacher, you really model that for all of us, and you create such a close-knit community where everybody feels seen and heard by you. And I have seen you do that. Like, you're actually doing that. It's in practice and it's happening, and it's changed my life. So say thank you for all that you do. Yes, Day. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your inspiration with us and your beauty and your community making and modeling all of these things on what it is to be human. So thank you for coming here and doing this with us. And I'm going to turn it over to you for our.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap up, but before we do, I'd love if we could all maybe close your eyes just for a minute. Settle into your body. Maybe fidget a little bit, like don't just immediately go still. Just let yourself just like a pendulum swinging back and forth until you arrive into some center. And when you get there, let yourself take a nice deep breath and a long exhale out. Actually, let's do that 2 more times. A nice breath in and a long exhale out. And 1 more, a nice breath in and a long exhale out. And just feel yourself sitting here in this beautiful theater on this late afternoon. Just letting what I've said tonight, what you saw, what you've heard, just let it kind of marinate. Just feel yourself sitting here in this precious moment. Maybe you feel your heart open. Maybe it's closed. But see if you can sense the aliveness in the room. You're not alone here. You're sitting with others. You're sitting on a stage that has a massive history to it. You're sitting in a city that has an incredible history to it. That's very alive. Let yourself just take this moment in. And when you feel ready, you can slowly open your eyes again. And because this is ritual, this is a ritual piece, I'm going to invite you into this ritual, which is, I'm going to ask you, after I'm done speaking, to come and be a part of this piece's impermanence. And so it's kind of heartbreaking to even invite that. And so you're invited to take one object from the altar. But if you take it, the caveat is for that piece to sit at the center of an altar that you're going to make tomorrow, or this week, or next month, or sometime in the future. And that you get to try your hand at this practice, and you get to make meaning with your life in your place that you live, whether that's in your kitchen, backyard, in the park near your house. We want to see this ripple into the world. And as you take it, just remember you're taking something that has been imbued with meaning, and you're being invited to create more meaning with it. Cool?